So the Green Bay Packers finally move on from Ted Thompson as their general manager. Finally. Packer fans have been clamoring for it for a long time, with the hope that their new general manager, Gut Kunst, would sit there and go a little bit heavier into free agency, need to shake shit up, do things a little bit differently. Well, this team went into last offseason, brought in Muhammad Wilkerson, brought in Jimmy Graham, and ultimately it didn't make a damn bit of difference. 2018 marked yet another wasted season with Aaron Rodgers. Again, you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You would hope that you would want to do more with him than the Green Bay Packers have done. And you look at this team, we have to start coming to a couple of realizations here. Number one is we need to stop overrating them every single year just because they have Aaron Rodgers. Number two is that while Aaron Rodgers is this great kind of seminal talent, maybe his impact on the team is not as great as you might think it to be, and his statistics sometimes could be perhaps a bit misleading. Number three is that this team needs a lot more work than we've probably previously let on. Well, you could say this, is that the season started off okay, 3-2-1 heading into the bye, but then they got into that meat of the schedule, that 6-game stretch that was going to be really, really tough, and they lost 5 of their next 6 games. It was all she wrote at that point. And the crazy thing is after week 1, where you're down 20 to the Bears at the half, Aaron Rodgers is out, and it looks like he's going to be out for a significant period of time potentially. He comes back in the second half, has himself his own Favre type of moment, lights the Bears up, they win, and you're like, okay, the rightful order of things in this division is going to take hold perhaps. The Packers will be the Packers, and everybody else will be playing for second place. So that didn't happen. So if nothing else, for Packers fans, the single best thing to come out of this lost, wasted season is that it finally mercifully marked the end of the Mike McCarthy era. Now, there were plenty of good things and highlights during McCarthy's 12 and a half years, but the time had already passed, and it most certainly had come. And once you lose at home, at Lambeau, to a shitty Arizona Cardinals team, a Cardinals team, by the way, that ended up with the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, there is no longer any rationale, justification, excuse for keeping Mike McCarthy. The big power struggle between him and Aaron Rodgers, A-Rod finally won it, for whatever that's worth. But for Packers fans, it's the hope of a new beginning, a fresh face, and a fresh start at the head coaching position, and one that's desperately been needed, frankly, for a couple of years now. As you look at this team, defensively, they were mediocre to bad, 22nd against the run, 12th against the pass, 18th in total yards allowed per game. Offensively, they eventually started to figure out that Aaron Jones is really good, so let's go ahead and give him the ball, because why would you want to give it to a back that averages 5.5 yards per carry? I'm just saying. And the thing is, it's crazy, is you look at an offense that has Aaron Rodgers on it, and sure, they were 6th in passing yards a game, 8th in total yards a game, but this was not a great season for A-Rod. It really wasn't. You could tell early on in the year that he was hobbled by the leg injury. He wasn't quite the same. His footwork, his happy feet were really, really bad. His decision-making at times was poor. And you say that a guy that has 25 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions on the entire year couldn't possibly have issues with decision-making. But sometimes it's going outside of the structure of the offense. It wasn't always Mike McCarthy's fault. And what was his completion percentage? 62%? So sure, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He didn't throw a lot of picks, but he missed a lot of plays, and he wasn't nearly as accurate as he'd been in the past. In the meantime, 49 sacks on the year. That's not solely on the Packers' offensive line. A lot of that's on A-Rod for holding onto the ball too damn long and not being able to avoid the rush as much as he had in the past. You can blame Mike McCarthy all you want, and he deserved a lot of blame, but he was not the only blamable party here. Ted Thompson has already been transitioned out of the general manager role. You can't blame him anymore. Mike McCarthy has now been fired. You can't blame him anymore. Who's left to blame? Aaron Rodgers. You're paying the guy a shit ton of money. He has to play better than he did this year. He has to be that guy for this team to have a chance. And it's a shame, too, because he got a great season out of Davante Adams, over 110 catches, almost 1,400 yards receiving, 13 touchdowns. The aforementioned Aaron Jones, who was really, really good, and he only had like 133 carries, I think it was. Should have gotten him the ball perhaps a little bit more. But this team has struggled defensively for a few years, finally moved out from Dom Capers. Again, another guy that you used to be able to blame that you no longer could. All these other guys have been gone. Who's left? Aaron Rodgers. At this point in time, anything else that goes wrong or doesn't go well for this team falls squarely on the shoulders and in the lap of Aaron effing Rodgers. This team has to figure out a way to put him in better positions. This team has to figure out a way to more appropriately, consistently balance out their offense, which is always a struggle with Rodgers and McCarthy. They got too fucking pass happy. They didn't get enough balance. It hurt their offense at times, and it most certainly hurt their defense. Hopefully with this hiring of Matt LaFleur, it can help rectify some of that. And this is going to be curious. Bringing in a guy like LaFleur, another offensive-minded guy. One time he gave Sean McVay a reach around. Worked with him a little while. That gets you a head coaching job in today's NFL. This is either one of these hirings that really, really works, or it really, really doesn't. And it won't take us a whole hell of a lot of time to figure out which one it is. But it's a real interesting offseason now for the Green Bay Packers. You don't have the crutch of being able to blame Ted Thompson anymore, Dom Capers, or Mike McCarthy. You've put the franchise quarterback that you're paying top-level money at his position squarely on him. Squarely on him. Going into this offseason, the Packers have a little over $45 million in cap space, and they have some key free agents like Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb, Muhammad Wilkerson. Frankly, at this point in time, I don't see why this team would have any urgency to bring any of them back. I understand Clay's been there for a decade, and he was a star and all of this, but he's not the same player, and he's most certainly not worth the price tag that he was being paid over the past couple of years. He's somewhat of a shell of a former self. He deserves half the salary of that. If he's willing to come back at half the salary, then so be it. But if he's not, it's okay for the Packers to be all right with moving on from him. Because for Christ's sake, you got 10.5 sacks out of Kyle Fackrell. The world won't end. Kenny Clark had 6 sacks on the D-line. You'll be okay if Clay Matthews is gone. It's just crazy to think that you're starting to see a bit of a transition. Some of these guys that you've identified with the Packers for several years now, Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb, may not possibly be back. They may not. And as a result, for a team that even with some of that cap space is going to again be stubborn about using it because they don't like to use it because apparently they don't want to try and go all in and win a championship with their future first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, it's going to be as important as ever to hit on the draft. You look at 2018 results, new general manager, first draft class, results were okay. Jair Alexander looks like he's a long-term player. I still believe Josh Jackson's going to be a long-term player. I still like Oren Burks and think he'll be a decent player for a long time. J.K. Scott was okay. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was pretty good in his rookie year. If you get anything out of Equinemius St. Brown in the future, and he had a couple of moments there, this wasn't a bad draft class. I don't know if they got any stars out of it, but they got several guys that could probably contribute for a long time, which they needed, frankly. But that's kind of an old refrain for the Packers is they draft, and usually they'll find guys that contribute, but they don't find a lot of stars or difference makers, or most certainly haven't in recent years. Because when you think about it, Aaron Rodgers was drafted in 2005. Clay Matthews was in 2009. Randall Cobb was, 2011? Davante Adams was 2014. What was Bakhtiari, 2013? I mean, their best players that you look at are guys that were drafted way in the past. It's been a lot of role players to average to good players, not much great, and plenty of misses. Sure, you could throw in some of the other guys like Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark. Granted, I'll give you that. But as many high picks as they spent on the defensive front, in recent years, they better eventually hit on a couple of them damn dudes. I'm just saying. So this team's going to have to do really well in the draft. In terms of their needs, you can kind of go on both sides of the ball. You can say defensively, they need another edge rusher. They need some better play from the inside linebacker position. Feels like they could use another safety. But I also look at the offense and I say, you could really use an all-around difference-making tight end. And while you might think that pick 12 might be a bit high, a bit rich to be thinking about one, especially when this tight end class looks pretty good, fact of the matter is they need one really, really bad. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to give Aaron Rodgers one. They could also use a better right tackle because Brian Bulaga sucks, period. I would think most Packer fans accept that reality by now, regardless of what PFF tries to tell you. Brian Bulaga sucks. He has trouble staying healthy, and when he is healthy, he's not very good. But I don't know. When you look at the Packers, you go into the offseason, you've got some cap space that they probably won't use. They'll have draft picks, including the 2 first-rounders because of the trade down with New Orleans last year, that you wonder if they'll really get any stars or any true difference makers. I'm not sure right now why there would be a whole lot of confidence as to think that 2019 for the Green Bay Packers, even with the new head coach, is going to be much different than 2018.